Loose watercolor florals are so much fun to make and are one of my favorite things to paint. But lately, I've been experimenting with using colored pencils with my florals in a super loose way. I can be more abstract with the paint and then use the pencils to give it more definition and to make it look like flowers. In today's tutorial, I will guide you step by step, but we will also take a peek into my thought process and hopefully you will leave feeling like you too can experiment and make up your own compositions. The possibilities are endless with this technique, so don't be afraid to do it in your own way as you follow along. To start, I will be using a size 14 round brush. I really like using big brushes for flowers, but if you don't have one, just use the biggest one you have or work smaller. Now the first color I pick is pink. I'm making sure I use enough water when I paint. You don't want to overdo it with the water, but you want just enough for it to stay wet for a while. And I paint in this loose and flower shape that's inspired by roses. You can make your shape inspired by any flower you like or make up your own. If you want to do what I do, just either make petals around a center point that's imaginary or paint in a center point and then make petals around it. You don't have to add a lot of detail, just 2 or 3 strokes and you're good. Your shapes don't have to be like mine either. And here I am painting in real speed to show you how fast I do these. I think the faster you make the strokes, the less you think about it, and the more interesting the shapes you get. But if you like to work slow, you can. As you can see, they're all similar but not copies of each other. Now I pick up a different color. I went with a pretty blue, and you can use whatever color you like, and I drop it in towards the middle of the flower shapes. It's important to do this when they are still wet for the beautiful bleeds and mixes. I also chose a third color in between the first two, a nice magenta, and drop it in around. I love using wet and wet technique to add dimension to my work like this, and I take advantage of it even more by adding another color, cyan, in as well. If you overmix it or mix the wrong colors, it can get muddy, and usually this happens with cheaper paints, but it's better to test the limits than to be timid with your paintings. Now that we have our color palette selected, I take the lighter cyan blue and paint in more of the flower shapes. I let them touch the pink flowers since they are still wet and I want the paint to bleed into each other even more. And I even use a darker blue to add in more flowers. Not every flower has to touch. Just play it by eye and see how balanced it feels. Now I do the same thing with my new flowers that I did with the pink ones. I add pink and magenta to the middles just like before and even dark blue in the lighter flowers. I'm really taking advantage of the wet and wet technique and I'm using the same techniques throughout the piece to make it look cohesive, but I'm still being as loose as I want. When I paint like this, I tend to not think. I'm more in the moment or the flow of things and let it happen. Sometimes the results don't work out, but sometimes they do, and when they do, I'm really happy. So I really like to paint like this, and even if it don't work out, it's fun. It's fun to live in the present moment when you paint. Now I mix a bluish green that I will use for the stems and leaves and loosely paint it under the flowers with a little U shape and a line. I let it touch the flowers sometimes and sometimes don't. Also notice how the lines end wherever I want them to. There are no rules. Next it's time to paint the leaves. I have a whole video on painting leaves that you can check out if you find it hard, and I'll leave a link to it below. But just keep in mind that just like flowers, there are a ton of different ways to paint leaves, so be playful. I decide to do long and pointy leaves and start by painting them randomly around the stems. These are the main leaves, and now I can add smaller ones to help balance the composition more. You could have used 2 different colors or drop more color into your leaves, but I decided to leave them plain so the flowers stand out more. I did use green I didn't really want to use in the right side a little bit more, and you can see that, but I left it as is because it's a loose piece and doesn't really matter. I think it gives a character. At this point, when most of the painting is still wet, I decide to also add in some splatter using the colors already used in the piece. I just load my brush with paint and water and gently tap it on my finger. Different brushes will give you different results. It looks good, but I still feel like it wasn't fully balanced, so I decided to add more small flowers throughout the piece using the same colors and techniques already used for consistency, and then I do the same thing with small leaves. You don't have to do this if your piece already feels good, but this is just something I chose to do because it didn't feel fully balanced to me yet. Also, by varying the scale of the flowers and leaves even more, it feels more interesting to look at. When you're fully satisfied, either let your piece air dry or use a hairdryer set on low to speed up the drying process. Now get a smaller brush. I got a size 6 round and pick either a much darker color, like I did dark blue, or you can be more realistic and use yellow or an orange. If you want it to be darker, make sure you are having a lot of paint on your brush and very little water. and I paint little dots in the middle of my flowers. You can make perfect circles or dab at an angle. I started with perfect circles, but then I thought the angle looked better, so I did that. And all the blue flowers are facing in one direction, and then I switched over and made all the pink flowers in the other direction for some variety and just a fun touch. And the painting portion of our florals is complete. The little dots add a lot of contrast and detail and just fun to the piece. Now let that dry, and it's time to use magical colored pencils. If you want to use something else like ink or markers, that's totally fine too. I chose 2 pencils that are similar to the colors we already used, but usually I use many more colors. I decided I'll outline the blue ones with the pinkish mulberry color and the pink ones with the cyan color. The cyan color is lighter and the mulberry color is darker, so it'll also make it more interesting. Now notice how doodly I am with my lines. I don't let them touch all the way, and I just hint at the petals with the shapes I make. I also add some texture with the messy lines sometimes. There is no perfect way to do this. You can do whatever you want. The human brain will recognize this as florals no matter what. But one thing that helps me is I have a lot of experience of painting and drawing flowers, so I have a good idea of the petal shapes I make. If you really like flowers, I recommend you do studies to get an idea of them too. And then you can make them as abstract as you want, or you can just do what I'm doing. Another fun idea is to use your pencils to add little details like circles. I drew circles of varying sizes and then lightly sketched around them for a soft halo. This is something I've never done before, but I really like the look, and I'm so glad I tried it out and discovered this. Once I'm done with the piece, I add my signature white dots with a white gel pen and maybe some lines for a little fun, and that's it. I actually really like how this turned out. At first when I looked at it, I was like, is this too much? Is it weird? But then I let it sit for a few days and I was like, you know what? I'll publish the video. It looks pretty good. It's funny how your point of view changes on your own art all the time. So I hope you guys enjoyed this tutorial. All the supplies used are linked below, and some classes that are related to this are linked below. And if you love what you made, that's awesome. If you don't, then hey, you probably learned a lot. I learned a lot more from my failed pieces. And if you're too scared to try, then remember that if you never try, you'll never learn. So just pick up your brush and give it a try. Just keep experimenting and never stop learning or practicing. And I'll see you guys in the next tutorial. Stay awesome and have a great day.